Alien girl hints teen human should return when he's older for saving her, so he did the scorching heat from dual suns. Beat down mercilessly on the barren landscape of Proxima Centauri, be turning the rocky train into a natural furnace. 24-year-old Jack Harmon wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the environmental controls on his exosuit. His mind drifting back to memories that had haunted him for 10 long years, approaching designated coordinates. Announced the ship's AI in its monotone voice. Atmospheric conditions stable for landing. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. 10 years of military training, of pushing himself beyond human limits, of becoming the man he'd promised to be. All for this moment, all for her. Begin landing sequence, he commanded. His voice deeper now than when he'd first crashed on this godforsaken rock as a frightened 14-year-old boy. The Colonial Forces rescue ship had found him 3 weeks after his escape pod malfunctioned, sending him spiraling toward this harsh alien world. 3 weeks that changed everything. 3 weeks that introduced him to Nera. As the ship's landing gear extended, Jack closed his eyes, let the memory wash over him. Stay back, the alien girl had shouted, her silvery hair whipping around her face as 3 hulking mercenaries cornered her against the jagged cliff face. Her golden orange skin seemed to glow under the dual sun's intricate markings pulsing across her exposed shoulders and arms. 14-year-old Jack had frozen, hidden behind a boulder. His survival training told him to stay put, to remain undetected, but something about the fear in her eyes so human yet ringed with iridescent purple, made his heart clench. Pretty little Australian, one mercenary growled, reaching for her tight black dress, worth a fortune on the black market. Before Jack could think, he was grabbing rocks, hurling them with all his adolescent strength. Hey ugly, he'd shouted, his voice cracking, pick on someone your own size. The mercenaries had turned, momentarily confused by the small human child challenging them. That moment was all the alien girl needed. With graceful precision she'd executed a series of moves that left 2 mercenaries unconscious. The third had lunged for Jack, but the boy had ducked, years of schoolyard bullying making him nimble. The alien girl had finished the job, dropping the final attacker with a swift kick to his head. When it was over, she'd approached Jack, her form-fitting dress accentuating curves that made the teenage boy blush furiously. You have courage, little human, she'd said, her voice melodic with an accent he couldn't place. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. She'd leaned down, her silvery hair brushing his cheek, and pressed her lips to his skin. The kiss was chaste but left his face burning. Come back when you've become a man, she'd whispered, her breath warm against his ear. The reward will be worth it. The landing gear touched down with a metallic thud, jolting Jack back to the present. He'd spent 10 years obsessing over those words, over the mysterious alien girl who disappeared into the rocky landscape before he could even ask her name. Environmental scan complete. The rear reported local settlement detected 2 kilometers east. Jack checked his reflection in the viewport glass. No longer the scrawny, frightened boy who'd crash-landed here. His chestnut hair was still unruly, but his face had hardened, jaw squared with determination. The Colonial Forces armor fit his muscular frame perfectly, the result of grueling training and unwavering focus. He'd come back a man just as she'd asked. The settlement came into view as Jack crested a rocky hill. Unlike the primitive structures he remembered, the Australian outpost had grown, with sleek buildings rising from the red soil. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons more advanced than he recalled. Halt, one called as Jack approached. State your business, human. I'm looking for someone, Jack replied, keeping his hands visible. An Australian woman. I met her 10 years ago. The guard's eyes narrowed. Many Australians here named Jack hesitated. I don't know her name. She has silver hair, golden orange skin with markings. She saved me from mercenaries when I was stranded here as a teenager. Recognition flickered in the guard's eyes. You speak of Commander Nalara. Commander Jack's heart skipped. The mysterious girl had risen in rank. Wait here, the guard ordered, speaking into a communication device. Minutes stretched like hours as Jack waited, the dual suns beating down. Finally the settlement gates parted and a figure emerged. Jack's breath caught in his throat. She looked exactly as he remembered, ageless, beautiful, dangerous. The tight black dress had been replaced by a fitted uniform, but it did nothing to diminish her allure. Her silvery hair was longer now, braided down her back, but those purple ringed eyes were unmistakable. She stopped several paces away, studying him with an intensity that made his skin tingle. So, she said, finally, her melodic voice sending shivers down his spine, you've returned for your reward after all. Jack swallowed hard. I made a promise. A smile played at the corners of her mouth. Yes, you did, and now you're a man. She stepped closer, her sense something Exotic and intoxicating, filling his senses. The question is, what kind of man? Have you become Jack Harmon? His name on her lips startled him. You know who I am. Nalara laughed, the sound like musical bells. I've known since the moment you threw those rocks. The real question is. She leaned in, her lips nearly brushing his ear. Do you know who I am? Follow me. Nalara commanded, turning with fluid grace that made Jack's pulse quicken. Her form-fitting uniform accentuated curves that were even more captivating than he remembered. The Australian settlement buzzed with activity as they walked. Jack noticed other Australians watching him with curious eyes, some wary, others intrigued. He was clearly a novelty here. Your people don't see many humans, I take it, Jack remarked, lengthening his stride to match hers. Nalara's lips curved into her half-smile. They've seen humans, they've never seen one. Invited as an honored guest, she cast him a sidelong glance. They've certainly never seen one who earned the trial of ascension. The what now? Jack asked, his military training making him instantly alert. They reached a circular structure at the settlement's edge. Unlike the other buildings, this one appeared ancient, its stone walls etched with intricate patterns that reminded Jack of the markings on Nara's skin. 10 years ago, when I told you to return as a man, Nalara said, placing her palm against the door which hummed and slid open. I wasn't merely being coy. Among my people, to save the life of an Australian is to earn the right of ascension, a series of trials that determine worthiness. Jack followed her into a chamber illuminated by soft blue light. Worthiness for what? Nalara turned to face him, her purple-ringed eyes intense. For joining, for becoming part of the Australian collective. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her golden-orange skin. For me. Jack's mouth went dry. I'm not sure I understand. The kiss I gave you wasn't just a promise, she explained, her voice dropping to an intimate tone. It was a marking, a claim by Australian custom. When one saves another's life, they earn the right to attempt union. Union, Jack repeated, the word hanging between them, charged with implications not just physical. Nalara clarified, though the way her eyes traveled over his body suggested that aspect wasn't insignificant. A joining of essence, of purpose. It's difficult to translate into human terms. She gestured to the chamber around them. Ancient symbols glowed on the walls, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to match Jack's heartbeat. Most Australians undergo the trial of ascension during adolescence, she continued. It tests not just physical strength but character, intelligence, adaptability. No human has ever attempted it. And if I pass? Jack asked, his voice rougher than intended. Nara's markings pulse brighter. Then you would be the first human deemed worthy of full Australian companionship. The way she said companionship made heat rush through Jack's body. There was clearly more to this than she was saying. Cultural nuances lost in translation. And if I fail, you return to your world. Having satisfied your curiosity about my promise. Her expression softened. There would be no shame in it. The trial is difficult even for Australians. Jack studied her face, searching for clues. Why offer this to me? You barely knew me. I knew enough. Nalara countered, courage, selflessness, potential. Her fingers brushed his arm, sending electricity through his nervous system. Besides, I've been watching your progress since you left, your rise through colonial forces, your actions in the Reelian conflict. Jack's eyebrows rose. You've been monitoring me. Australians have resources throughout human space, she said with a mysterious smile. I needed to be certain you were developing into a man worthy of the trial. And am I? He asked, and stepping closer, Nalara's markings pulsed in a pattern Jack somehow knew meant she was affected by his proximity. That remains to be determined. The trial will reveal all. She moved to a control panel and activated a sequence. The chamber hummed with energy. The first challenge begins at dawn, she explained. You should rest. What exactly will I be facing? Jack asked. Nalara's expression became serious. I cannot tell you. Preparation would defeat the purpose. The trial must test your true nature, not your ability to train for specific challenges. She stepped closer, her scent exotic and intoxicating, filling his senses. Know this, Jack Harmon, no matter the outcome, you've already impressed me more than any human I've encountered. Her hand rose to his face, fingers tracing the spot where her lips had touched him a decade ago. The contact sent a jolt of pleasure through his body. Rest well, she murmured. Tomorrow you begin your journey to becoming something no human has ever been. As she turned to leave, Jack caught her wrist. The contact sent another surge of sensation between them, and he saw her markings flare in response. This reward you promised, he said, his voice low. Is it worth 10 years of waiting? Nar's lips curved into a smile that promised things beyond his imagination. That depends entirely on how much you want it. Her free hand rose to his chest, resting over his rapidly beating heart. How much do you want it, Jack Harmon? The look in her eyes made his blood rush. Whatever Trials lay ahead. Jack knew with absolute certainty that his return to this planet had set in motion something far more profound than he could have imagined as a 14-year-old boy throwing rocks at mercenaries. "I'll see you at dawn," he said simply. Nilera nodded, her expression both pleased and expectant. "Indeed you will, and then we'll discover exactly what kind of men you've become." The first rays of the dual suns had barely crested the horizon when Jack arrived at the ancient chamber. He'd spent the night in restless anticipation, his mind racing with possibilities of what the trials might entail. Nilara awaited him, but she wasn't alone. 5 Australian elders stood in a semicircle, their golden-orange skin adorned with more elaborate markings than he'd seen on others. Among them stood a younger male Australian whose posture radiated hostility. "This is Krell," Nyler explained, noticing Jack's gaze. "He will oversee your first trial." Krell stepped forward, his silver hair cropped short against his copper-toned scalp. "I protest this mockery," he announced, addressing the elders rather than Jack. "No human should be permitted to attempt the sacred trial of ascension." The eldest Australian, a female with intricate markings that covered most of her visible skin, raised her hand. "The ancient laws are clear, Krell. Any being who saves an Australian life earns the right to attempt the trial. Laws written before we knew other species existed," Krell countered, shooting Jack a contemptuous glance. "Yet laws we still honor," the elder replied firmly. "Prepare the chamber." Krell's markings pulsed with what Jack interpreted as frustration, but he complied, moving to a control panel embedded in the wall. Nilara approached Jack, her voice low. "Ignore him, focus only on what lies ahead." "What exactly does lie ahead?" Jack asked, her purple-ringed eyes held his. "The chamber of reflection. It will draw from your mind your deepest fears, manifest them as reality." She placed a hand on his arm, the contact sending warmth through his body. "Remember, what you see isn't real, but your reactions to it are." Before Jack could respond, the floor beneath him began to glow. Concentric circles of light spread outward and a mist rose from hidden vents. "Begin," announced the elder. The mist thickened, obscuring everything around him. Jack's military training kicked in. "Control your breathing, assess your surroundings, identify threats." But as the mist swirled, it seemed to penetrate his mind, pulling at memories he'd buried deep. Suddenly he was no longer in the chamber but back on the battlefield, Proxima Centauri 4, where he'd lost half his squad to an ambush. The screams of dying men filled his ears. Blood soaked the ground. "Not real," Jack muttered, forcing himself to remember Nara's words, yet the scene felt utterly authentic. The smell of plasma fire, the weight of his weapon, the bodies of his friends. Captain Reynolds appeared before him, accusation in his dead eyes. "You left us behind, Harmon." "You ran, I didn't run," Jack countered, his voice steady despite the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. "I followed orders to get the intel back to command. You abandoned us." Another fallen comrade accused, materializing from the mist. Jack closed his eyes, centering himself. "This isn't real. This is the trial." When he opened them, the battlefield had vanished. Instead, he stood in his childhood home, watching his father pack a bag. "I'm leaving," the apparition said, not looking at him. "You're not worth staying for." The words cut deep. His father had abandoned their family when Jack was 8, and part of him had always believed it was somehow his fault. "No," Jack said firmly, "you left because you were weak, because you couldn't handle responsibility. That's not on me." The scene shifted again. This time he stood before Nara, but she was laughing at him, surrounded by Australian males. "Did you really think I'd choose a human?" she mocked. "You're not even worthy to breathe our air." Jack felt a stab of insecurity, the fear that he'd misinterpreted her interest, that he'd spent 10 years chasing a fantasy. "No, but something about this vision rang false. The real." Nilara's eyes held warmth, not contempt. "You're not her," he stated calmly. "The real Nilara wouldn't need to belittle someone to feel superior." The fake Nilara snarled, her face contorting unnaturally. The illusion wavered. Suddenly Jack noticed something odd, a small device embedded in the chamber wall pulsing with an energy that didn't match the patterns of the rest of the room. Military instinct took over. He moved toward it, ignoring the increasingly desperate illusions trying to distract him. The device was well hidden, but now that he'd spotted it, he could see it was foreign to the chamber's design. Without hesitation, Jack ripped it from the wall. The mist dissipated instantly. He found himself back in the chamber, the elders watching with expressions ranging from surprise to approval. Krell stood rigid, his markings pulsing with unmistakable anger. "What is this?" Jack asked, holding up the device. The eldest Australian approached, examining it. "An amplifier. It would have intensified the chamber's effects beyond safe levels." All eyes turned to Krell, whose copper Skin had darkened with what Jack assumed was the Australian equivalent of a flush. The human should face the true test of our ancestors, Krell defended, not some watered-down version that is not your decision. The elder stated firmly. You are removed from these proceedings as two guards escorted Krell from the chamber. Nara approached Jack, her eyes shining with something that made his heart race. You did more than face your fears, as she said softly. You saw through deception. Few Australians have ever detected sabotage during their trials. Her hand brushed his, the contact sending electricity through his nervous system. How did you know? The illusion of you felt wrong. Jack admitted it didn't match what I know of you. Nara's markings pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. And what do you know of me? Jack Harmon. The way she said his name made heat rush through his body. Not enough, he replied honestly, but I'd like to learn more. The eldest Australian cleared her throat. The first trial is complete. The human has succeeded despite interference. She nodded to Jack with newfound respect. Rest. The second trial begins at dusk. As the elders departed, Nilara remained standing close enough that Jack could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. You've impressed them, she murmured. That's not easily done. And you? Jack asked. Have I impressed you? Nilara's lips curved into a smile that sent his pulse racing. You impressed me 10 years ago with stones and courage. Today you showed something more valuable, wisdom. Her fingers traced a pattern on his arm that left fire in their wake. The man you've become. Is she intriguing? The look in her eyes made Jack's breath catch. Whatever the next trial might bring, he knew with certainty that the reward Nar had promised was becoming more enticing by the moment. The second trial chamber looked nothing like the first. As Jack entered at dusk, he found himself facing what appeared to be a miniature ecosystem, a dome space filled with alien vegetation, strange rock formations, and a thick reddish atmosphere that shimmered with heat. The chamber of adaptation, explained the eldest Australian, her intricate markings glowing in the dim light. This environment replicates the sacred grounds of ancient Australis. For millennia, our young have proven their worthiness by surviving its challenges. Jack studied the chamber with a solder's eye. The temperature readings on his wrist device were climbing rapidly, well beyond human comfort levels. The atmosphere contains elements toxic to your human physiology, the elder continued. The flora responds aggressively to foreign presence. The ground itself will resist your steps. Sounds homey, Jack remarked dryly. A hint of amusement crossed the elder's face. To complete this trial you must retrieve the emblem of ascension from the center of the chamber and return it here. You have one planetary rotation. Jack nodded, removing his outer armor. The less weight the better. One final condition, the elder added. No technological assistance. Your suit's environmental controls must be deactivated. That complicated things. Without his suit's protection, the chamber's atmosphere would quickly affect his breathing and vision. As he disabled his suit systems, Jack noticed Nilara watching him with an intensity that made his skin tingle. When their eyes met, her markings pulsed with a rhythm he was beginning to recognize as concern. Begin, announced the elder. Jack stepped into the chamber immediately. The heat engulfed him like a physical force. The air tasted metallic, burning his lungs with each breath. The ground beneath his feet shifted subtly, as if trying to unbalance him. Gritting his teeth, he pushed forward. The vegetation reacted to his presence, fronds curling away or reaching out with thorny appendages. One plant released a cloud of spores that made his eyes water and skin itch. Friendly, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd covered perhaps a third of the distance when he noticed something odd, a patch of vegetation that seemed more aggressive than the rest. Its coloration slightly off. Military instinct made him pause, picking up a small rock. Jack tossed it into the suspicious area. The vegetation erupted violently, releasing a cloud of dark spores that dissolved the rock on contact. That's not part of the test. He realized someone had introduced a deadly variant into the chamber, and there was only one person with both motive and opportunity carefully circumventing the trapped area. Jack continued toward the center. His vision was beginning to blur from the toxic atmosphere, and each breath felt like inhaling fire. The ground shifted more aggressively now, forcing him to constantly adjust his balance. Finally, he reached the central platform where a small crystalline emblem hovered in a beam of light. As Jack reached for it, movement caught his eye. A panel in the chamber wall had slid open, revealing Krell with what appeared to be a control device. The saboteur's eyes widened in surprise at being spotted. Before Jack could react, Krell activated the device instantly. The chamber's environmental systems went haywire. The temperature spiked and the already toxic atmosphere became a swirling vortex of caustic elements. Jack grabbed the emblem and dove for cover as vegetation around him began to wither and die from the extreme conditions. Through watering eyes he saw the chamber door burst open and Nalara rush in environmental suit hastily donned. "Jack," she called, her voice muffled through her mask. "Nara, stay back," he shouted, but she was already moving toward him, navigating the dying vegetation with practiced ease. A rumble shook the chamber. The environmental systems were overloading, the delicate ecosystem collapsing. Jack spotted Krell fleeing through the maintenance panel. "The chamber's going to breach," Nalara warned, reaching his side. "We need to get out." "Oh, not without stopping him," Jack insisted, gesturing toward the panel where Krell had disappeared. Nalara hesitated, then made a decision that clearly went against protocol. She removed her mask and pressed it to Jack's face. "Breathe," she commanded. The clean air cleared his vision instantly. Before he could protest, she was pulling him toward the maintenance panel, her own breathing becoming labored in the toxic atmosphere. They squeezed through the opening just as a section of the chamber ceiling collapsed. The maintenance corridor was narrow and dimly lit, but Jack could see Krell's retreating form ahead. "He's heading for the environmental control hub," Nalara gasped, her golden-orange skin paling from exposure to the toxic elements. "If he disables the settlement's main systems," Jack understood immediately, the entire Australian settlement could be at risk. Despite his own exhaustion, he surged forward, closing the distance to Krell with determined strides. The Saboer turned, surprise and hatred contorting his features. "You should be dead, human." "Sorry to disappoint," Jack replied, lunging forward. Krell was quick, but Jack's Colonial Forces combat training gave him the edge. A swift strike to Krell's wrist sent the control device clattering to the floor. Jack followed with a takedown that pinned the Australian against the wall. "It's over," he said firmly. Nalara caught up, her breathing ragged but her eyes fierce. "Why, Krell? Why endanger our entire settlement?" "Because he threatens everything," Krell spat, glaring at Jack. "Humans cannot be allowed into our sacred traditions. They'll corrupt everything we are." Security personnel arrived, taking Krell into custody. As the immediate danger passed, Jack became acutely aware of Nalara's condition. Her exposure to the toxic atmosphere had left her weakened, her markings pulsing erratically. Without hesitation, he swept her into his arms. "Where is your medical facility?" "Down the corridor." She managed, her body surprisingly light against his chest. "But Jack, the trial." He looked down at her, this extraordinary being who had risked her life to help him. "To hell with the trial." The Australian medical chamber was unlike any hospital Jack had seen. Nalara was placed in a regeneration pod filled with a luminescent fluid that seemed to interact directly with her skin markings. "She'll recover fully," the Australian healer assured him. Her choice to remove her protection was unexpected. Jack stood vigil by the pod, the crystalline emblem still clutched in his hand. The elders arrived, their expressions grave. "You retrieved the emblem despite sabotage," the eldest acknowledged, "and prevented a greater catastrophe." "But the trial was interrupted." "With respect," Jack replied, his eyes not leaving Nalara's form. "I don't care about your trials, I care about her." To his surprise, the elders' markings pulsed with what appeared to be approval, and that Jack Harmon may be the most important test of all. Jack hadn't left Nara's side for 3 cycles of the regeneration pod. The luminescent fluid had gradually restored her golden orange complexion, her markings regaining their vibrant pulsa. When her eyes finally opened, the relief that flooded through him was overwhelming. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice slightly raspy. "Of course I stayed," Jack replied, helping her as the pod drained and she stepped out, wrapped in a shimmering robe that clung to her damp skin. The eldest Australian entered the medical chamber, her ancient eyes appraising them both. "The council has deliberated on your situation, Jack Harmon." Jack straightened, still supporting Nalara with one arm. "And your actions during the sabotage have satisfied the requirements of the second trial, and more than satisfied them." The elders' markings pulsed with what Jack now recognized as approval. "You prioritized the welfare of an Australian and our settlement over personal achievement. This is the essence of what the trial of ascension tests." Nylar's hand found Jack's, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that sent warmth cascading through his body. "However," the elder continued, "Krell's faction grows restless. They claim that without completing the traditional third trial, no human can truly be deemed worthy of Australian companionship." Jack felt Neller tense beside him. "What exactly is this third trial?" The elder and Nilera exchanged a glance laden with meaning. The bonding, Nylar explained, her markings shifting to a deeper hue that Jack hadn't seen before. "It tests compatibility between potential mates on all levels: physical, mental, spiritual mates." Jack repeated the implication, sending his pulse racing. "The reward I promised," Nolara said softly, her purple-ringed eyes holding his among My people, when one saves another's life, they earn the right to attempt a permanent bond. It's more than what humans would call marriage. It's a joining of essence. Jack's mind reeled with this revelation. And this is what you meant when you told me to come back as a man. Yes, she admitted, a boy couldn't handle the bonding. It requires complete maturity, complete openness. The elder cleared her throat. Traditionally the bonding is conducted privately, but given the unprecedented nature of this union, the council requires witnesses to validate its authenticity. Witnesses? Jackass. Suddenly uncomfortable. Not for the physical aspects, Nara clarified quickly, her markings pulsing in what Jack now recognized as the Australian equivalent of a blush, only for the ceremonial elements and the final confirmation of compatibility. The elder nodded. The ceremony will commence at midnight. I suggest you both prepare yourselves. With that she departed, leaving them alone. Nilara moved to a window overlooking the settlement, her silvery hair catching the light of the setting suns. You can still decline, Jack. No one would think less of you. He joined her at the window, studying her profile. Is that what you want for me to decline? No, she answered without hesitation, turning to face him. But you should understand what you're agreeing to. The bonding isn't temporary, it's a lifelong connection that transcends physical distance. Our essences would be intertwined. Jack reached out, his fingers tracing the intricate markings on her arm. They pulled beneath his touch, responding to him in a way that made her breath catch. Tell me something, he said, his voice low. That day 10 years ago, when you kissed my cheek and told me to come back, did you know then what you were offering? Nilara's eyes softened. I knew you were special, different from any human I'd encountered. The way you charged in to help a stranger with nothing but stones and courage. Her hand rose to his face, fingers tracing the spot where her lips had touched him a decade ago. I didn't plan to offer the bonding, it was instinctive. And now? Jack asked, acutely aware of her proximity, of the subtle scent of her skin that had haunted his dreams for years. Now I'm certain, she whispered. The question is, are you? Instead of answering with words, Jack leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their lips met, and the contact sent a surge of sensation unlike anything he'd experienced. Her markings flared brilliantly, illuminating the dim chamber as her body melted against his when they finally parted. Both breathless, Nara's eyes were wide with wonder. That was unexpected. Bad? Unexpected? Jack asked, suddenly concerned. No, she laughed. The sound like musical chimes. Among Australians the first kiss is usually less intense. Your human passion is quite remarkable. Jack grinned. And that's just a preview. Her markings pulsed rapidly. Then I look forward to the full experience. A knock at the door interrupted them. An Australian attendant entered, bowing respectfully. Commander Nilara, the council requests your presence for pre-ceremony preparations. The human must also prepare separately, as tradition dictates. As Nilara moved to follow the attendant, she paused, turning back to Jack. Tonight you'll discover exactly why I asked you to return as a man, she promised, her voice carrying a sensual edge that made his blood rush. And I assure you, Jack Harmon, it will have been worth the wait. The ceremonial chamber was unlike any Jack had seen in the settlement. Ancient symbols adorned walls of polished stone, illuminated by soft blue light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. The Australian elders stood in a semicircle, their elaborate robes and glowing markings creating an otherworldly tableau. Jack had been dressed in traditional Australian attire, a form-fitting garment that left his arms bare, with patterns etched into the fabric that mimicked Nyara's markings. The material felt alive against his skin, responding to his body heat and movements. A hush fell over the chamber as Nyara entered. Jack's breath caught in his throat. She wore a ceremonial dress that echoed the one from their first meeting, black, form-fitting, with strategic openings that revealed her luminescent markings. Her silvery hair flowed freely down her back, adorned with tiny crystals that caught the light. Their eyes met across the chamber, and in that moment Jack knew with absolute certainty that the decade he'd spent becoming the man standing before her now had been worth every second. Approach the circle of unity, the eldest Australian intoned, her voice resonating through the ceremonial chamber. Jack and Nilara stepped forward together, their fingers intertwined. The floor beneath them began to glow, concentric circles of light spreading outward from where they stood. The bonding has 3 phases, the elder explained: communion of mind, harmony of spirit, and union of essence. Each must be completed successfully for the bond to form. Jack nodded, trying to appear more confident than he felt. Nilara squeezed his hand reassuringly, her markings pulsing with a rhythm that somehow calmed his racing heart. Communion begins, announced the elder. A soft mist rose from hidden vents enveloping them. In a shimmering cloud, Jack felt a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull, spreading upward. Open your thoughts, Nara whispered, don't resist. Jack closed his eyes, focusing On relaxing the barriers of his mind, suddenly he wasn't alone in his consciousness. Nalara's presence flowed into him like warm sunlight, bringing with it flashes of her memories, emotions, and in sensations. He saw her childhood on a world with 3 moons, felt her pride when she earned her commander's rank, experienced her shock and intrigue when a young human boy had fearlessly confronted mercenaries to save her. This is incredible, Jack thought, and knew she heard him when her mental presence brightened with pleasure. Your mind is different from an Australian's, her thoughts replied, more compartmentalized yet remarkably adaptable. Jack felt her curiosity as she explored his memories, his determination during colonial forces training, his loneliness on distant outposts, and most vividly the decade he'd spent thinking about her, wondering if he'd ever see her again. You truly never forgot her, thoughts whispered, tinged with wonder. How could I? He responded silently. The mist began to dissipate, signaling the end of the first phase. Jack opened his eyes to find Nalara staring at him with newfound understanding. Communion is achieved, declared the elder, genuine surprise in her voice. Few Australian pairs connect so completely on first attempt. Nara's markings pulsed with what Jack now recognized as pride. Humans are remarkably compatible with us in ways we never imagined. Harmony of spirit begins, the elder announced. The chamber's lighting shifted to a deep indigo. The ceremonial garments they wore began to respond, becoming almost fluid against their skin, the patterns shifting to create matching designs across both their bodies. This phase reveals our essential natures, Nalara explained softly, our truest selves. Jack felt a profound warmth spreading through his chest, radiating outward. To his amazement, his skin began to emit a faint blue glow where the garment touched it, not unlike Nalara's markings. That's not supposed to happen, one of the younger elders whispered, earning a silencing glance from the eldest. Nalara's markings were changing too, shifting from their usual patterns into new configurations that somehow mirrored the energy emanating from Jack. Their glows began to synchronize, pulsing in perfect harmony. Your spirit resonates with mine, Nalara breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. The garment is responding to your essence as if you were Australian. Jack felt it too, a sense of rightness, of completion. Maybe our differences aren't as significant as our similarities. The eldest Australian stepped forward, examining the phenomenon with ancient eyes. In all my cycles I've never witnessed this, a human spirit manifesting. Australian resonance, is that bad? Jack asked. On the contrary, the elder replied, it suggests a compatibility beyond our understanding. Harmony is achieved more profoundly than anticipated. The chamber's atmosphere shifted again, the light becoming a warm amber that bathed them in a golden glow. The final phase approaches, the elder announced, one of essences traditionally conducted in private, but the initial binding must be witnessed. The other elders formed a circle around them, their hands raised in a ceremonial gesture. This is where it gets interesting, Nara whispered, her voice carrying a sensual edge that made Jack's pulse quicken. Place your hands upon each other's hearts, instructed the elder. Jack placed his palm against Nara's chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart, or hearts, as he discovered during their mental communion that Australians possessed a dual cardiovascular system. She mirrored his action, her touch sending waves of pleasure through his body. Now we begin the vision quest, the elder continued. You will see potential futures, both challenges and triumphs, that await your union. The chamber seemed to dissolve around them. Jack found himself and Nalara standing in a series of rapidly shifting scenes, some on Earth, others on alien worlds. In each vision they faced different situations together, navigating cultural misunderstandings among humans who stared at their unconventional pairing. Nalara laughing as Jack attempted to explain baseball, Jack standing proudly beside her as she addressed an interspecies council. One vision showed them facing discrimination from both sides, yet standing resilient together. Another revealed them building a home that blended both their culture, and yet another they stood watching dual suns set over a landscape where human and Australian children played together. Our potential futures, Nalara's voice echoed in his mind, some challenging, some beautiful, all worth facing together. Jack responded, the visions coalesced into a single powerful image, the two of them, older but still vibrant, surrounded by what appeared to be a family that bridged both their species. The sense of fulfillment and joy emanating from this vision was overwhelming. Gradually the ceremonial chamber rematerialized around them. The elders were watching with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. The vision quest has never manifested so clearly, the eldest said, her voice hushed. The compatibility is undeniable. Nalara's markings were glowing more brilliantly than Jack had ever seen, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the energy emanating from his own body. The public portion of the ceremony is complete. The elder announced the final union must now be completed in private as tradition. Demands. As the elders filed out of the chamber, Nara turned to Jack, her purple ringed eyes filled with an intensity that made his breath catch. Now, she said, softly, taking his hand and leading him toward a doorway that had appeared in the chamber. While you discover the true reward I promised all those years ago. Jack followed, his heart racing with anticipation. The doorway led to a private sanctuary adorned with soft illumination that responded to their presence, brightening and dimming in harmony with their emotions. 10 years ago, Nalara said, turning to face him, I saw potential in a brave boy. Today I see fulfillment in the man you've become. Her fingers traced the contours of his face with exquisite tenderness. Are you ready to complete what we've begun? Jack drew her closer, feeling the remarkable heat of her golden orange skin against his. I've been ready since the moment I returned to this planet. As their lips met, the markings on Nara's skin flared brilliantly, casting the sanctuary in a radiant glow that matched the intensity of the connection forming between them, a connection that transcended physical attraction, cultural differences, and even the vast distances between their worlds. Jack awoke to the gentle touch of dual sun streaming through the sanctuary's windows. Nalara lay beside him, her golden orange skin glowing in the morning light, silvery hair cascading across the pillows. Her markings pulsed with a peaceful rhythm that somehow matched his own heartbeat. The night had been transcendent. Their union had been unlike anything Jack could have imagined, a melding not just of bodies but of essences, as if they'd temporarily become a single being while still retaining their individual selves. As if sensing his thoughts, Nara's eyes opened, their purple rings brightening at the sight of him. I can feel you, she murmured, placing her hand over his heart. Not just physically, I can sense your emotions, your presence. Jack realized he felt it too, a constant awareness of her that went beyond the physical. Is this normal for Australian bondings? To an extent, she replied.